Where to begin? Many years ago, I came out of a long-term relationship and I was dumped and replaced by someone my ex described as younger but more mature, called Doodle, a name which helped soften the blow. And I had a lot to learn about compromise and sharing, living with other people, being less self-centered. And one of the reasons why we split up was because I was forever involved in foolish projects. And so to get over the heartache, I set myself another foolish project. I decided to go around the world for a year and visit alternative communities and try and learn firsthand what it is to live with other people and share and be confronted by uncomfortable and difficult situations and difficult people, including myself. And that isn't the story that I want to share with you tonight, although I might try and sell you the book at the end if you're interested. What I want to share with you tonight is the most extraordinary community that I visited during that year, and arguably the most extraordinary place I've ever visited on the planet. Out of curiosity, would you put your hand up if you have ever visited Damanhur in Italy? I'm not expecting any hands to go up. Put your hands up if you've heard of Damanhur in Italy. Okay, that's quite impressive actually, that's nearly 8 people. Put your hands up if you've heard of the Temples of Humankind. Okay, so what I want to share with you this evening is one of the most incredible architectural feats of the 20th century, and my continuing astonishment that it remains ignored by the world at large. It was created by these people. This is Damanhur, a community now of about 1,000 strong people living in the foothills of the Alps, about 40 minutes drive from Turin. I spent a month. I've been to this community many times, but my first visit I spent a month with these people. We were all there to learn about the community, to live in a nucleo, which was one of their communal shared houses, to attend lectures that told us about the esoteric philosophy behind Damanhur. The Damanhurians call themselves a nation of builders. They build eco-houses first for the local area, now for many parts of Italy. They grow organic, GM-free crops, food that they sell to the high end of restaurants and supermarkets. They have a flourishing economy. And I was thrown into the lives of these people for 4 weeks in Damanhur, and I'd heard so many stories about the community, I did not know what to believe. I knew that they had built this incredible temple. I'd also heard rumours of time travel and singing plants and all sorts of strange things. Now, the Damanhurians are a curious bunch of individuals. This is salamander olive on the left and hobbit watercress on the right. Very much enjoying Hobbit Watercress's choice of attire for this photo as well, crush velvet and bum bag. So everyone in Damanhur is given, if they commit to the community, eventually they get given an animal and plant's name. It's a question you ask yourself when you go to Damanhur. I could never be given one of these names because I was never a fully committed member of the community. But if I had, chaffinch coriander, I think would be my preferred choice of name. Now, you meet people in Damanhur called sponge strawberry, goat carob tree, swordfish banana. People sound like Jamie Oliver recipes out there. And you get to say to the community the name that you'd like, but ultimately it's chosen by committee. And they tell a story about an alpha male, sort of this puffed up alpha male, who, when he'd made his commitment to the community, he'd step forward and say, "I wish to be known as Panther Deadly Nightshade." And to teach him a lesson, they called him Dung Beetle Pansy instead, and that's the name he still goes by. So in 1978, this community, which at the time numbered 28 people, decided that in secret, at night, they would start to dig into the mountain, into the land that they bought, and then they would build a temple, the like of which the planet had not seen for thousands of years. And they didn't want anyone to know about this. So the digging began by hand. It wasn't until they got deep enough that they began to use drills. This continued for 23 years, unnoticed. And it was in 1991 that they were subjected to a raid by the Italian authorities. This was in collusion with the Vatican and the Mayor of Naples. There'd been a suicide death cult, this didn't help their cause, a suicide death cult in a nearby mountain, the Solar Templars in Switzerland. 56 people committed mass suicide, and there was a movement to get rid of these unwanted cults in the Alps, and the Damanhurians were presumed to be, you know, similar dangerous, weird people. So the authorities sent in 250 members of the armed forces with machine guns, helicopters and sniffer dogs on some claim that they owed 18,000 lira for tax evasion or something. It was the biggest raid that had ever been seen in Italian history, bigger than any mafia raid, and they found nothing. The Damanhurians like to boast that they didn't even find a cigarette. They are so clean living, it's painful. And obviously the news story discredited the community for a while, but they eventually bounced back. But the authorities also got wind of the fact that they'd been building something in the mountain without planning permission. And eventually, the Damanhurians came clean. There was the threat that they were actually going to put detonators into the mountain. And they said, okay, we'll come clean, we'll show you what we've done. And the Mayor of Naples, who was their arch-nemesis, was invited to see the temples of humankind, and he entered the temples a skeptic, and he exited a convert with tears in his eyes, and he said, "This is the most extraordinary thing I have ever seen. I will fight with you for the chance for you to keep this," and that's what happened over the next 5 years. This is the person. This is the director of Damanhur. This is Alberto Araudi, who was running the community when it was just 28 people. He changed his name to Falco Tarasacco, which is Hawk Dandelion, Mr. Dandelion. Now, in 1984, I think it was, they released a 7-inch single by a rubber plant called Heli. And it's meant to be music entirely generated by the plant. If any of you know the late 70s works of Brian Eno, the kind of ambient music that he made, it's kind of a shit version of that, really. Tinkly Bells. It did really badly in Italian charts, but Heli went on to tour around Europe. She came to England, London a couple of times, and got a bit of a cult following. I didn't get to meet Heli. She was on tour when I went to Damanhur the first time, but other plants are now learning how to make music, and I'm a bit embarrassed that I can't remember the name of this plant, but because we were introduced. But I got to jam with this plant. So they have these bulldog clips that are attached to a box of whatever that gadget does, and if you stroke the leaves of the plant, a sort of gentle tinkly sound comes out. And if you're aggressive or unkind or sadistic with the plant, it gets all kind of angular jazz, a bit John Zorn if you know your avant-garde music. So I got to jam with this plant, and in 2015 a whole plant orchestra came to the Chelsea Flower Show, which must have freaked out the regulars there. There was pot plants and cheese plants and all sorts, and that was rather lovely actually. In 2014 I got the chance to make a Radio 3 documentary about the Damanhurian people, and we recorded a duet between a spider plant and a jazz singer called Macaco, which again was rather lovely. So, this is the big stuff. All I've forgotten to mention, they built a time machine. We'll come back to that. So this is a cross-section of the temples of humankind. It isn't just one space. There are 9 separate chambers down there. And on the far left, at the bottom, that's the labyrinth. The labyrinth continues to be worked on, 40 years on now, because they want to make it like the labyrinth in the Name of the Rose, where you could genuinely get lost in the corridors. So this is one of the rare photos of the construction of the temples of humankind. Now, we have to pause here and ask ourselves about the practicalities of how a bunch of people with no professional skills were able to build what is the size of St. Paul's Cathedral in secret at night, and deal with issues of waterlogging, of temperature differences, of lighting, of subsidence, and they did. They dealt with all of these things. It is the most extraordinary piece of outsider art, and it was just built with love over those decades. Originally, before the raid, they they were hoping that it would never be found. We may never know about this if it wasn't for the raid. And that was the original entrance to it. Now, you can just see the edge of the house. All of the houses in Damanhur within the community all have these sort of dandelion designs at the side, and the houses are painted white. They all look the same. So if someone said there's a secret temple hidden in one of these houses, you wouldn't know which one it was, and the community were never going to tell you. And even if you found out it was this one, which is surrounded or was surrounded by fences and dogs, if you managed to get in, you'd still struggle to find where the doorway was. The doorway used to be there, well, it sort of is there now. There's a gift shop here. Two of the prerequisites of them keeping the temples of humankind was health and safety features, a staircase, a lift, and a gift shop. And so you used to go in through that door, and it was a utility room, and there was a washing machine. There'd be somebody, maybe kind of employed all day to hang up socks and look inconspicuous. And you well, this isn't the entrance to the world's biggest temple. It was. And you go through the next door, and you'd end up in a corridor that became like the wardrobe in Narnia. Because you're walking down this corridor and it just went on forever. And hieroglyphics start to appear on the walls, and at the end, right at the end, there's a lift. And you go into the lift and you descend into the bowels of the mountain. And I've got a few of the pictures of the temple spaces. You can see how extraordinary this building is. This is also the world's largest stained glass coloured Tiffany cupola, so they have 2 Guinness World Records. If you had broken in, if you'd found it, this actually would have been the first space that you'd have entered. It's quite a small temple, this one. And you'd see that there was no other door. And you'd think, well, maybe this is all they've built. It's not quite as impressive as the rumours led me to believe. But you'd be wrong, because you'd need to know where the secret button in the wall was. And if you could find the secret button hidden within the mosaics and the paintings, then these stairs would unfold below you in hydraulics and take you to the next space. When you get to the next space, which is the Temple of Earth and Stars, which has a mezzanine level that's about twice the size of the space we're in now, and very colourful. You don't have to like the art. It is outsider art, and it is all created by the hands and visions of the residents. When you got into this space, you might think, this is it. This is amazing. There aren't any other doors other than the one I came through, and I can't see any stairs in the floor. So this is no. There's more. If you knew which stone slab in the wall to press, the entire wall slides by and takes you into the next space. Pure Indiana Jones. So, these are more photos of the temple space. This is the Hall of Spheres, and this is a photo we have of the labyrinth. The labyrinth continues to grow. We all know those books that have bucket lists of 101 things you must do before you die. And it always says, go see the pyramids, go see the Sphinx. I say, bollocks to that. Don't bother. They would have looked amazing a few thousand years ago, when they were at their prime, when they were colourful, when all of the spoils hadn't been removed from the interior. You go see the pyramids now, and they're way past their best. They're falling to bits, they're dusty. Go to Damanhur. It's about 100 quid. To fly there with EasyJet. It's about 50 euros to go in, and the paint is still drying in the temples of humankind. The labyrinth continues to grow. It is truly an extraordinary experience. Oh, and they built a time machine. So the last space that you go into in there contains a self-fit cabin. But if you nudge them, if you pester them, particularly Asperity and Nanas, sunset butterfly pineapple, who for many years was their spokesperson, you say, look, Asperity, this is the time machine. She goes, yes, David, yes, this is our time machine. So the time machine they use to travel only back in time. You can only travel back in time because it's less complex. You can't travel forwards in time. That'd be crazy into the future, because that's a period of greater complexity. Not possible according to the law of Damanhur. So they have sent a few members back into the past. Gorilla Eucalyptus, who I can only presume is a large, hairy man, went back in time In fact, quite a few. I might have the... there's a little section on how time travel works that appeared in a magazine many years ago. Here we go, Gorilla. So Gorilla travelled back almost 5,000 years, met some local people and made some blueberries. That is a riveting read, I tell you. So a few of them claim to have travelled back into the distant past with their time machine. And now we pause again. And you're probably thinking, oh, you know what? I was really, really enjoying hearing about the temples of humankind and these extraordinary people, and they've kind of blown it, because I can't believe they've actually built a time machine. Why did they do it? Why did they spend 23 years building the world's largest underground temple, and the proof of the pudding is there, and then go and ruin it by going, we built a time machine as well? And everyone goes, no, you haven't. Does it work? Yes, it does. No. Why did they build the temple in the first place? I need to tell you a story. Am I for time, Tim? We're about a third of the way through. No, so, why does the community exist? Why did they build the world's largest underground temple? Okay. The Earth was destroyed in the year 2179. This has already happened. This feels like it's our future, but actually it's our past. The Earth was destroyed because alien terrorists manipulated the free will of the good people of Earth, and they sent us on a path of self-destruction, and we destroyed the planet. Every Friday night in our galaxy, there's a current affairs program, which is hosted by a wide range of different alien creatures. And the big story that Friday was that Earth had been destroyed. And they have a chat about it. They say, a bit of a shame, had great potential, here's Ted with the weather. Now, they have a rule that, like David Attenborough has with his programs, is like you watch, you observe, but you don't get involved. But one of the alien delegates thought, it's a bit of a shame, I really like that planet. I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to go back in time and have myself pre-incarnated into the body of an Italian man who's going to wake up and realise who he is. He's an alien from the future whose job is to save the people of planet Earth from imminent destruction and put the planet on a new timeline. And that's what happened. So in 1950, Alberto Rowley, who became Hawk Dandelion, he was born. He strayed from the path a little bit as a travelling salesman in his early 20s, but he got back on the path, and he created the community of Damanhur. And you know, in 1978, when they met on the mountain, you know, this is what they were doing. They were needing to build something. So why build a temple? Now, Hawk Dandelion said to the community, if you need to build a timeline, a new timeline for a planet, you need to find the planet's synchronic knot. Every planet has synchronic lines. These aren't ley lines. Ley lines are made up. They're bullshit. Synchronic lines, they're different. They're real. And synchronic lines, they only cross in one place on a planet, and that's where the energy sits. So you need to find it. And Hawk Dandelion had the power to be able to find the synchronic knot. So together they travelled the world in search of this knot, knowing that they needed to build a giant battery to jolt the Earth onto a new timeline. Now, I don't know what they'd have done if they found it was in Central Park, or you know, in the middle of Birmingham or something, or you know, Buckingham Palace. But instead, they travelled the whole world, and then they found it was just an hour up the road from where they lived in Turin, and that bit of land was for sale, and it was going cheap, you know. So that was fortuitous. So they build over 23 years. They build this giant battery. Curiously, geologists have proven that the rock that it's built into, myelinite, is highly conductive. It's a rare rock strata, and if they're built into any other rock strata, the whole thing would have subsided and had waterlogging. That is curious. So they build the Temple of Humankind. They do some rituals. They jolt the Earth onto a new timeline. They save us. They save the people of planet Earth from imminent destruction. That's a good reason to run a community. That's a good reason to live. Okay. But it just begs one question: why did they build the time machine? Now, they play down the time machine. You ask them about it, they don't want to talk about it, let's talk about the crops, let's talk about the building, let's talk about time. It's like, why? It's a time machine. People want to know about this stuff. And they say it's not important in our everyday life. And the reason is this: because if you build a timeline for a new timeline for a planet, you need to keep it in a good state of repair. Now, those of us who live in Brighton and are forever getting the bloody bus replacement from 3 bridges, know what a nightmare it is if you live somewhere where the rail line is in a constant state of disrepair. Worse for a planet, because if the planet's not looked after, then it's going to jolt back to its original destiny, and we know what that is. So you need to keep it in a good state of repair, so you need the right nuts and bolts, and grease and oil or whatever. Where do you get those from? Well, the nearest shop that sells those is right at the other end of our galaxy, and parking's a nightmare, so you're not going to go there. But there used to be a shop in Atlantis, on our planet. But to get to Atlantis, to buy the nuts and bolts, you'd need a time machine to travel back in time. So the reason why they play down the whole time machine thing is they only use it now and again for a bit of shopping. Now, when I went to Damanhur to try and get my head around this community, that's what I heard. I wasn't told it directly, I read it, I heard snippets, but it's in the air. That is in the air. That's why the community came into existence. That's what they will tell you. And it also, perhaps, again, gives us pause for thought that there may be some bullshit within that. I struggled so hard. And at night, when I was with my nucleo, with the fellow travellers who were learning about Damanhur, I'd say to them, does anyone believe that the Hulk Dandelion is a man from the future and he's an alien and that the time machine works? And they, to my astonishment, most of them would go, don't really care, not really interested. The community's great though, isn't it, David? Aren't the people here brilliant? And I'd say, yeah, they are actually. The Damanhurians, they're smart, self-deprecating, funny. They're a really brilliant, amazing people to be around. But I can't get my head around all of this stuff. They just made up all this shit. It ruins it for me. And I wrestled, and then I had a light bulb moment. A friend of mine who sent me there described Damanhur as marvellous bollocks. That was his. Oh, it's marvellous bollocks. Those were his words. And I came to disagree with him. The light bulb moment came. This is Sunset Butterfly Pineapple. This is Hesperidie Ananas. It came with a conversation I had with Hesperidie Ananas in the gift shop one afternoon. They just had these books made, like Asterix books, L'Historie de Damanhur, which they tell. They pretty much tell the story as I've been telling it to you. This is the raid, I think we can see happening in these pictures. And here someone's nicked the battery from the time machine. It's like sort of John Pertwee back in the 70s when he couldn't get off the earth. So I'm talking to Hesperidie and I said, these are great. I can't read Italian, but they look really interesting. The story de Damanhur, the history of Damanhur, is that the idea? She said, no, it's the myth of Damanhur. That's what these books are. They're our myth. And I said, the truth? No, the myth. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, this is the story that resonates with us. This is the story that has meaning for us. We don't ask you to take it literally. We don't expect you to take it literally. Many of us don't. It's a metaphor for our community. And I thought, oh, bloody hell. They've done something really, really fantastic at this place. They've created their own myth. Now, part of my exploration into this idea of a community that has created a story to inhabit comes from, and I'm nearly at the end here, comes from a man called Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologist and an author back in the 20th century. Joseph Campbell famously said, in the 20th century, we've dismantled many of the myths that we once lived by because they no longer serve us. And he was talking about myth of empire. He was talking about myth, perhaps, of subservience to one's country at all costs. Perhaps he's talking about myths of religion that no longer work because of dogma and patriarchy. But he added with a caveat, we need new myths to live by. This is the most important thing for us right now, to find new myths to give us meaning in life. And I think it's no coincidence that Joseph Campbell collaborated with George Lucas on the writing and creation of Star Wars. And together they made a new myth. It's a timeless myth, Star Wars. It's the hero's journey. But also, it speaks to us, and the reason why it still speaks to us 40 years later, because it's about the disconnect between humanity and machines. That lack of compassion that's there. Maybe you could argue that it's a comment on fascism. There are many things to be read into Star Wars, but it's a new myth. The Matrix is another film, I think, which brought a new myth to us. but they're just films, they are just stories. There's something extra at Damanhur. They've created a living myth. They had a director, he died sadly a few years ago. Hawk Dandelion was the director of the film, the story, the play, whatever you want to consider it. And whoever went to Damanhur and agreed to participate, they took roles. And the story grows and becomes ever more complex and detailed as the years roll by. And I don't think there's anywhere else on the planet that has done this. And it's a myth that's worthy of Hollywood. It's a myth of aliens, it's a myth of the destruction of the planet. There are many other stories woven into it. And I think that this community is unique for this reason, and unique as well, obviously, because of the temples of humankind. So what is Damanhur? They call themselves a laboratory for the future of humankind. I call them a living myth. I think these are interchangeable ideas. And why is this important? Well, because of what Campbell said, because we need new myths to guide us. We need new stories. And we need new stories. This is something that's increasingly coming to us from some of our critical commentators, political commentators. George Monbiot has been writing about this in The Guardian, saying, where are the new stories? Where are the stories to guide us? Facts and science are not enough anymore. We need more than that. We need that emotional engagement. Alex Evans's book, The Myth Gap, says if we want to deal with global climate change, science and facts, again, not enough. We need stories to combat the propaganda of the far right, who are putting stories out to denigrate these ideas. We need new stories. Where do we look for our new myths? I think we look to our counterculture. I think we look to those signposts in community, in our world around us, that make us feel uncomfortable because they're new and they're challenging and they seem dangerous and weird and sometimes offensive. And I think one of the greatest signifiers of the 20th century was this. This innocent piece of art, which is now recognised as one of the most important pivotal moments in the art world ever, where Duchamp said, I'm going to call this a piece of art, and I didn't do anything to it other than put my name on the side and the date. And it was rejected. It was the only piece of art that was rejected by a gallery submission in New York, where they said, members of the public, send in your art, we'll accept everything. But they smashed up this one. It was too challenging for them at the time. And yet there's an irony here, because it wasn't Duchamp who created that. We are forever reinventing ourselves and rediscovering things. It was Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Lorenhoven, who was a close friend and collaborator with Marcel Duchamp. We now know was the person who was behind the most important work of art of the 20th century. We have to, keep our eyes and ears open to the stories we tell ourselves, because they keep changing. And there was an article about it in the newspaper recently. Quentin Crisp, I think, was another great signifier of change, reminding us, one of the great quotes that he said, make no effort to join society, stay right where you are and wait for society to form around you. We need to look for those new myths from the people and the systems that are refusing to conform. And finally, the man who inspired me to go to Damanhur in the first place, a man called Ken Campbell, who was a theatre performer and a comedian, the one who said it's magnificent bollocks, and I think it's more than magnificent bollocks. One of my favourite lines from Ken, when people used to accuse him of being mad because he would tell crazy stories, I'm not mad, I've just read different books. And so I leave you with this message tonight, to encourage you to read different books, maybe, but I Bust Utopia, which was the story of my travels. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I've overrun, my apologies too. Cheers.
Thank you so much, David. Well, I know where I'm going at the weekend, off to Damanhur. So, anyone got any questions? This is the point of just ask some questions of the speakers, and they will enlighten us further. Anybody desperate to go to Damanhur with me? I can. Yes, question there. Yeah. Oh, you're off to Damanhur with me. Yes, question there.
Do you think that's how everything started? Because it was always a myth. Like, do you think our whole existence is based I don't want to get as risky as saying religion, but things like the Egyptian hieroglyphics, like you said. Do you think it is all coming from a story someone told and then someone's science.
I do, yeah. Everything is symbolic. Everything is symbolic. But I would include science as a symbolic system as well as, you know, all of these things are valid. And I think as metaphors, they all resonate with us or have the potential to resonate. And I should add, as you know, again, as a caveat about Damanhur, were there people at Damanhur that swallowed it hook, line and sinker? Yes, they were. You know, I met people that said, oh, yeah, no, the time machine actually works. And I think, oh, okay. But by and large, there was an understanding that it was a mythological system that they created. And I think that's a valid way of viewing religion as well.
Like
is
you
that
chose to believe that it was, well, you thought it was going to be real, and then when she said to you, actually, no, it's a myth, we never told you it was real.
exactly, this is it, yeah, because, yes, thank you. So on a Friday night, you could meet Hawk Dandelion and you do a Q&A. And I remember thinking, I was such a twat. I was thinking, I've got the question for him, I'm a smart bugger, I'm going to be able to catch him out. Of course I couldn't. But, so I went along and I said to him, I understand that you claim to be an alien from the future, and that you built a fully functioning time machine, and that you've travelled to Atlantis. Which, if any of these are true? And I was so pleased with myself with that, I thought, he can't wriggle out of that. And his answer was, I'm just a man trying to do my best. And at the time I thought, that is a politician's answer. I can't believe it. And I was so disappointed. And somebody else asked the question, and they got the same deflection. And it was only later on that I reflected on this, and I thought, you clever bastards, the lot of you, you know exactly what you're doing. You know, you are keeping the story alive, and you are not directly answering any of these questions for a very good reason. And yes, some of us get drawn into these things and we take it hook, line and sinker, we become conspiracy theorists, we surrender to the dogma. But if you see it, Campbell was a great one for saying, if you can see the metaphors and the symbolisms of our systems, including the rich ones in religion, there's much to be gained from this. There's the danger of being, you know, as the Buddhists say, don't mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon.
Brilliant. Any more questions? Yes, over here. I'm going to run in. I say sometimes like Jeremy Carr, but it's more like Kilroy Silk.
Thanks. You said that you were there for 4 weeks in the first place. Have you gone back several times since then?
I have.
And why are you not a member?
Why am I not a member? One of the things that I discovered during my year of visiting different communities was the great joy of the experience was sharing time with other people, meeting people who took great pride and love for the communities that they created. It's so different to how we live in our towns and cities. Living in Brighton particularly, you know, it's like your blood boils when you go sit on the beach and it's a beautiful day and the people next to you light a barbecue, drink their beers, and they just walk away. And you think, how could you do that? And you would never see that in a community. People just wouldn't, because there's that sense of we share this as a collective. What was the question again?
Why aren't you a member?
Why am I a member of Damanhur? Oh, sorry, and I was leading up to say, I missed the diversity of culture and people and opportunities and bars and theatres and the heartbeat of the city. I just couldn't. It's too isolating. And I'm a great believer that if you want to bring that sense of community into your life and into the lives of others, you've got to throw yourself in the deep end. Don't go and do it over here where no one else can join in, or where it's an elite thing. Not that the Damanhurians are elite, but you know, there's the sense of we're going to do this over here, away from the horrors of society as people might perceive it. Go and take it to the cities. You know, let's change the way that we relate to each other in our towns and cities, and bring a greater sense of community into our own lives, and which is what I tried to do when I returned after my year. I won't tell you how, because it's the end of the book, probably most people want to read it, so I don't want any spoilers for the tens of people who are going to rush up and buy it.
I was just about to ask, because I know what you did, but I won't then mention it. But any more questions about Damanhur and David's experience and living mythology? I can't see any hands. I'm missing no hands. So in which case, can we thank David for a wonderful talk?